Ionic equation. In ionic equation, if I put a NaCl and AgNO3, you will find something will clump together. This clump together, AgCl, we call it precipitation. Now let's see. If I put NaCl in, and now I put the AgNO3 in. And now, when you look at this, you see what happened. And now, after a while, you will see very soon they will all clump together. This AgCl, we call it precipitation. And now, we're going to look onto the equation side of it. And now we're going to look onto this ionic equation. Ionic equation break up into three parts. The normal equation, ionic equation, and net ionic equation. We do it one by one. First, the equation. We balance out the equation. AgNO3, NaCl, precipitate AgCl and NaNO3. And pay attention to the state, because we look onto the state change to decide. Once we have the state, now we break up into ionic equation as follows. If you see there is an ion as aqueous, you break it separate into an ion form. You separate it as an ion form. Because students will still remember, if you see an aqueous, means in water, they're going to be separate and surrounding by water. So, on this ionic equation, you can see that the Ag are surrounded by water, and NO3 also be separate and surrounded by water. As a Na also surrounded by water, as Cl also will be surrounded by water. So, put it into separate form, separate form, separate form, separate form. But when it comes to solid, do not separate, because they clump together. They have a reaction. And the remaining, put it as a separate form. So, rule. All ion as aqueous, put it in all aqueous ion, put it into a separate ion form, as they will be surrounding by water. And then, after we do this step, we do the next step. We just by tracing. We're tracing where's the AgCl come from? The AgCl come from Ag and the Cl. Then we cross out the rest. Then we just net it off, and that is the ionic equation. You just net it off. Ag plus Cl become AgCl precipitate. That's ionic equation. Now let's do another example. And those cross out that, which is the NaNO3, as they not involved in reaction, we just call them a spectator, that they just only watching and didn't do anything. Now let's do one more example of net ionic equation. I select one equation as from the early, calcium chloride plus K2CO3, and you form precipitation, calcium carbonate and 2KCl. Equation is balanced. Now let's put onto the ionic equation form. Remember the rule, all aqueous break it up into the separate ion form. Solid do not separate. So the Ca become 2 plus, Cl become 1 minus. Be careful, student. do not write it as a Cl. Do not write it as a Cl2. If you write Cl2 like this, people will misunderstand you as a chlorine gas. You should write it as 2Cl and as 1 minus, chlorine as minus. And KCO3 will form into 2K and 1CO3, 2 minus. Same, and solid, do not separate, leave it as it is. KCl become 2K and Cl. Careful, it is 2Cl. Why? Because 2 means 2K and 2Cl. So be careful of this little trick. And now, once you separate, you can see this trace back this solid. This solid comes from the calcium and carbonate, and the remaining you can just cross out the rest. Now it forms into this net ionic equation, which comes from calcium plus carbonate, form into calcium carbonate. Precipitation. Student, you will find this way of doing ionic equation are quite easy. But soon you will ask, what is the purpose of doing net ionic equation? It's simple enough, but is there any meaning, any purpose? Just now I'm going to show you. I tell you a story. The story is, I have a weeks of experiment with my student. On Monday, I do one experiment. On Tuesday, I do the second experiment. Wednesday, another experiment. Thursday, experiment. Friday, experiment. Saturday, experiment. After I done these 6 experiments, and I tell my student, now you've been spending whole weeks on experiment, and time for you to write me the equation with closed book, not allowed to see. And then the student will be so shocked and say, how I going to handle the situation like that? And now let's see. Remember, on the net ionic equation, the Ag with something, this something I don't really care, I cross out. And on the other part is something with chloride. This part I also don't care. So now it is easier. Now we do the next step. Look, AgCl, AgCl, AgCl. Am I just only repeating of what I write? PBI, PBI, PBI. Am I just repeating what I write? So I just cross out this line. Now it becomes 2 lines. AgCl form AgCl. Of course, AgCl form AgCl. What else can it be? PB and 2I, of course, form PBI too. What else can it be? So let's disregard this line. And now what you're left with? You just left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 compound. And the student, all they need to do is memorize these 6 compound before the test. And then they just will be okay. So what is net ionic equation? If that is an Ag, that is a Cl in the solution, I know this is the precipitation. So this rule is to help to simplify many equations. The purpose of ionic equation is now you can simplify all the big complex equation into shortly two steps into just only memorize a few rules, and then I'll say yes, you complete the precipitation rule. So and now you just remember this few and you learn all precipitation topic. So this ionic equation not only can do precipitation, it can do in many equations too. Like as precipitation, all you need is to memorize this. Ignore all the rest. All this ignore. Memorize only this line. How about acid-base reaction? Same rule. You know acid is a H plus, base have a OH. They H and OH always form water. Always form water. The remaining is a positive negative aqueous salt. So you can just memorize this. All equation is under the same rule. All equation form salt. All acid, all base will form into the same rule. So basically, you just read one equation, it represents you the rest. As this aqueous plus and aqueous minus give water. That is the whole topic of acid. As acid with metal, no matter what metal, I don't care. No matter what acid, I also don't care. I will just write it into, this is an acid, doesn't matter what metal, they all form salt and hydrogen gas. So the state is gas. The aqueous become a gas and salt. So now I can simplify the rule to say, okay, no matter what reaction, acid with metal will form into the similar chemical reaction, salt and hydrogen gas. So now you've done 3 parts of chemical reaction. On this, student, you may be familiar with this chart. As all chemical reaction can write into the equation form to do calculation. Then you can analyze in half equation form, and you also analyze in ionic equation form. Ionic equation form, pay attention onto the aqueous state change into solid or change into gas or change into liquid water. So when you see the change, you can easily do a lot of equation like precipitation. You just learned that 6 items, you've done the whole topic. Acid base, H plus and OH minus form salt and water. You've done the whole topic. Acid plus metal form salt and hydrogen gas. You've done the whole topic. Same as decomposition. Metal oxide form into metal and oxygen gas. You've done the whole topic. Fuel with oxygen give carbon dioxide and water. You've done the whole topic. And same as metal displacement that you follow. So what I try to say is, look, this ionic equation, you just learn some simplified rule and you simplify all the chemical equation and by some simple step. So chemistry is not that million of equation to learn. You learn this main equation, and every equation, the remaining, no matter you've seen it or you haven't seen before, you can deduce then just by learning this simple ionic equation rule. So student, revise yourself of different chemical reaction. On first, we pay attention to the coefficient front number. to do calculation. Ionic equation, we pay attention to the state change to know what equation, what type of reaction. And then we look onto the half equation to analyze the charge. Are they give electron oxidize or gain electron reduce? And this is the whole structure of chemistry. No matter what stage, year 11 or year 12 or one day you're in uni, and that's all about the equation. That's all equation you learned.